Tensions between Ukraine and Russia are escalating as Russia continues to build up its troops in Ukraine. Our next guest believes that there is a tipping point on the horizon and that a market correction is waiting to happen. Kim Iskyan is the editor at SNA Global Contrarian. Kim, good to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. And, you know, a lot of people have been waiting for some type of tipping point, some type of catalyst to make this market go lower. Hasn't seemed to happen yet. What do you think is, in fact, on the horizon as it relates to Russia and Ukraine?
Well, Catherine, I think that what's happening is that things are deteriorating, clearly. Russia's doing what everyone is very cautious about defining as an invasion, but this really is kind of invasion light. It's kind of like a creeping invasion where the same objectives will ultimately be met. And I think at a certain point, tensions may rise enough that markets say, hang on a second, we didn't quite realize what was going on here, and this is actually by far the most serious conflict since the Cold War in this part of the world, and it could really have lasting economic implications for both the West as well as for Russia.
Kim, what will you be watching for then? Will it be more commentary from the West? I mean, at this point, I've talked to a lot of people today. We're going to have more on the show later, the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, in fact, and it seems as though there hasn't been as much of a response to push back Putin at this point, a response from the West. Do you think, in fact, if we hear stronger words, more sanctions, that might be the catalyst?
I think that could well be the catalyst, because at this point the West it wants to make it a series of steps, because as soon as you say this is an invasion, then it's a lot more difficult to step back from that and walk back from that and say, okay, this is an invasion, but we're not going to impose sanctions. As soon as you acknowledge that the conflict has reached a certain level, then you have to do what you've been saying the whole time that you've said you would do. And those sorts of sanctions, which would be probably approaching the kind of Iran-style sanctions on the financial sector, on imports, and a lot of other sectors, that could, I think, could be the tipping point.
So, Kim, how do you then look at the economy, how that impacts the economy, likely first, of course, in Europe more so than North America?
Well, I think that Russia is a very important trade partner and consumer of a lot of products from Europe, from Germany in particular. And so as soon as demand declines, you're going to see people losing their jobs in many parts of Europe. And then on the other side, we can't forget that Russia does supply about a third of all the natural gas to Europe. So there is the risk that at some point Russia will say, okay, if you're going to do all this to us, you know, we have this lever too. And we can also, for example, hike the price of gas, which would be in violation of existing contracts. But if the gloves come off, it could get really unpleasant.
Kim, it's interesting. Your firm does focus on out-of-favor global investments, countries, contrarian. That is part of your company's name. When you look at the situation there, how do you interpret that in terms of your investments that you're trying to make? Some people are saying and have been buying various markets that have been affected over the past 3 weeks. I don't know if people have really been stepping into the Russian market. That has continued to fall. But what's your view? Do you step into some of these markets that have, in fact, been hit?
Well, I think that with Russia, the Russian market is trading at pretty much close to all-time low valuations, a price-to-earnings ratio of around 5. But I think it's important to remember that even when everything was rosy, all of 6 months ago, a year ago, the Russian market was trading at a PE of around 7 or 8. So let's say tomorrow everyone makes up and hugs and holds hands again, then maybe you see a re-rating of the Russian market by 30%, maybe 40%. So Russia has, for really years and years, been a market that a lot of investors have been very cautious on, and now we see that that's been for very good reason. So I think the Russian market will see a lot of volatility, but it's not at all a market where you want to buy and hold for a long time, because it's going to be problematic, and I think have low valuations for really a long time.
What areas do you think are interesting right now that maybe is contrarian?
You know, Catherine, I go to places that are pretty much off the beaten trail. I was in Argentina recently. I think there's some very interesting opportunities in Argentina. And Argentina is a market that has for years been pushed off the radar because of a lot of incredibly inept government policies. That's going to change within a year and a half, because a new government is going to come in and all the signs point to the new government, whoever it's run by, being dramatically improved. So I think we could see significant revaluation there. I think a market as obscure as Mongolia is also quite interesting. It's another market that's off the radar that people don't really think about, but does have a lot of interesting opportunities. And I think there are also opportunities in selected sectors in European markets where there's a lot of benefit from from ECB, European Central Bank easing, from liquidity being pumped into the system, as we've seen in markets globally. I think a lot of that will also help boost some European markets.
Kim, let's talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people are wondering what Mario Draghi might do next week. I'm hearing that unlikely to add stimulus to the market, but it sounds like, from what I'm hearing from you, that maybe there will be something done at some point. Which sectors would actually be benefiting?
I think there's certainly a lot of uncertainty there. I think that the European Central Bank definitely wants to use the element of surprise to a certain degree. And if it can surprise to the upside, then that would be a great thing. And I think there's always a benefit to central banks in general to kind of talking down expectations. I think that might be what's going on right now.
And Kim, which sectors, though, would you be buying and avoiding if, in fact, we get any type of stimulus from the ECB?
Well, I think I'd be avoiding a lot of the financial sectors. And I might be focusing more on the industrials at this point. But that's just from a very big picture perspective. All
right. We will leave it there. Kim, great to have you on the program today. Thank you so much.
Super. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you. That was Kim Iskyan. He's the editor at S&A Global Contrarian.